Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Hampshire Business Show. My name is Chris Pastrana, and today I'm here with Nick Zaricki. How's it going, Nick?
Good. How are you doing, Chris?
Good. Now, Nick is with the New Hampshire House of Representatives, which is pretty cool because I've never done politics before, so this will be a fun little interview just to kind of like bridge the gap into politics just a tiny bit. Because oddly, politics and business overlap quite a bit.
Yeah, it one affects the other in a lot of ways, and sometimes people don't realize that.
Yeah, which is a fun conversation to have because people don't realize how often they overlap, especially when it comes to taxes.
Yeah.
So I guess it's a good place to start. So let's get a little history on you, kind of like where'd you start from, politics, kind of your intros.
All right. Well, I grew up in Goffstown, as you know. For listeners that may not know, we were actually on the wrestling team together way over 10 years ago.
That was a long time.
Long time ago. But around 2009, 2010, I always sort of had an interest in politics and, different issues. And that turned into sort of an activism, and I started getting active in a lot of both political campaigns and issue campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, in 2014, there's I'd like to say something inspirational happened, but honestly, people around me just got tired of listening to me complain about it and told me I either had to run or shut up.
Yeah.
So I ran because I'm not going to shut up. And I happened to win representing Goffstown in the New Hampshire General Court, House of Representatives. And I first won in 2014, and I got reelected in 2016.
It's pretty good. It's awesome. Now, this is actually a good place to start because people kind of have a basic idea of what the federal government looks like, kind of.
Right.
But state government's probably a little different depending on how things work. So I do want to kind of go over, because you mentioned the general court, just kind of go over the very basic levels of state level.
Sure. So just like the federal government, we're broken up into the three branches, legislative, executive, and judicial. In New Hampshire, the legislative branch, or the New Hampshire General Court, is composed of a House and Senate. And it's kind of interesting because our House is comprised of 400 members. We are the largest state legislative body in the nation, and we are the third largest legislative body in the free world. I think just behind Congress and the House of Commons, over in the UK.
Yeah.
And on the Senate side, we also have the smallest Senate in the country at only 24 members. So I guess they spent all their budget on House members, so they kind of had to scramble, do what they could with the Senate. But it works a lot like the federal. And a bill passes the House, it has to go to the Senate. They pass it or veto it or amend it and pass back to the House. Eventually, if the two legislative bodies agree, it goes to the governor for his signature. On the executive side, we have the governor, obviously, and he's in charge of signing or vetoing bills. But we also have something called the Executive Council, which the way I like to explain that is they're sort of the board of directors to the governor as CEO of the state of New Hampshire.
Okay.
So they have to sign off on a lot of the contracts. For instance, when our current governor, Chris Sununu, was running for governor, he used to be an executive counselor. There was a lot of talk about him supporting a Planned Parenthood funding contract. And it wasn't a bill, it wasn't anything we got to discuss in the House. It was just contracting services, and the executive council gets to, vote on whether they approve or don't do that. So we have a fairly weak chief executive in New Hampshire, which seems to work out pretty well. And then the courts, it's very similar to the federal, where you have the, the criminal, the superior, and then the Supreme Courts. We also have the family courts, which have created their own issues for possibly another discussion. And a few other little differences, but essentially the function is very similar to the federal government.
Yeah. All right, cool. Yeah, I like talking about that because sometimes it gets a little crazy.
Yeah.
And people love talking, federal politics, but a lot of times your biggest changes, especially to your own life, are going to come at state level. So why people don't get involved there, it baffles me a little bit.
Right.
But I just like to talk about it.
Well, it's interesting because people seem to focus on the federal, especially, the presidency, especially now. Almost everyone could tell you what President Trump has done in the last month, even though in reality what he has done is probably going to affect your life a very small amount, if at all, compared to not even your governor or your state representative, even your city councilor or mayor. They can make decisions that massively affect your life, what you can and can't do, even how much money is in your pocket with every paycheck.
Yeah, a great example is that little issue in Goffstown with they were overtaxing people for a while.
Right.
Like that's a great example. Like that directly affects your pocketbook way more than anything at the government level.
Oh yeah, that whole thing where they were, giving us back some of the school budget for property tax relief.
Yeah.
Because everyone from Goffstown knows our taxes are so low. Why would we even need that?
Yeah. So, oh man, it's funny. So, taxes. This is a good break into politics here. Business and taxes kind of go hand in hand, and not even on a personal level. So I was gonna say on a personal level, you can usually get people to agree less taxes are better. That's not even true now anymore.
Right.
So, but generally, on a personal level, you can agree. Yeah, the more money I have, the better.
Right.
Generally, but on business side, it's hard to get people to admit that. Hey, if you give businesses money, they can do stuff to generate more, jobs, growth in the community, stuff like that. But there's like this hate for businesses, especially big business.
Oh yeah.
And so that's always a fun place to talk when it comes to taxes, because this isn't, again, not national, but New Hampshire their taxes are pretty high, I guess, for businesses.
They're up there. We have. Obviously, we don't have an income or sales tax per se, but we do have the business profits tax and the business enterprise tax, which is basically a tax on land holdings for a business. So if it's owned for a certain amount of land you hold or a certain amount of holdings you have to pay a percentage on that. And obviously, and it kind of comes down to the parties, and I'm sure you can guess which one is which. One wants to cut them and thinks that'll grow business, and the other one wants to raise them and thinks by taking money from the people who make money, you magically make more money. One of those ideas has sort of been proven to work. The other one will be nice and say the jury's still out. But we have managed in the past 2 sessions, after a hard fight with then Governor Hassan, now Senator Hassan, unfortunately, and in cooperation with Governor Sununu, we've managed to lower business profits and business enterprise tax a bit with some promises that if the economy keeps growing, which it has so far, we can lower them further.
That's really good. I know that. Again, that's why I like having politicians on. And I'm not going to get super political, even though I probably will, because I'm on the end where I'm not a Republican, I'm not a Democrat, I'm a Libertarian, so I'm kind of in the middle in a weird way. But taxes are just generally, they don't help anybody. And they hurt more than they don't. So seeing that they're actually going down is good. And I love that. Yes, good. Awesome. What was I going to say? Oh, and I was actually going to bring up later on onto my list, we were going to talk about, some of the issues with, partisan politics.
Right.
And how you lose a little bit of that flexibility. But it's good to see that the type of compromise was made where, hey, if it works, let's keep doing it. It's good.
And
I like that.
That's one thing. There's certainly plenty of partisanship in Concord. Anyone who says there isn't is lying or selling something. But one thing we can do certainly a lot better than Washington is sort of come together and at least agree sort of, okay, well, we may disagree on what this may do, but you know what? Let's try it for 2 or 3 years. Or
Yeah.
if the economy looks good, let's have this opportunity to do so.
Yeah.
And sort of compromise in that sort of way and actually move the ball forward instead of shutting down the whole damn state like
Yeah.
some people like to do.
Yeah. And I like that because when I think of politics, I would love to see it work more like science, where
Right.
it's easy. You know, you have a set of tests. If you do something, you change one variable and it doesn't work, just put it back and try something else. But a lot of times you can't do that
Right.
because they're like, okay, we did this. It didn't work. Okay, let's do this too. And I'm like, no, stop.
Yeah.
Stop just screwing with everything. Or they'll do like 7 things at a time. I'm like, just slow down.
Hey,
Take a step.
The scariest thing in politics is definitely the law of unintended consequences.
Yeah.
No matter how smart you are, no matter how meticulously you research your policy, there's always going to be some effect you didn't account for.
Yeah, of course.
And that's a very good libertarian argument for best government is the government that governs least, to kind of say, well, tweaking things hasn't worked too fantastically. Maybe we should try and let things run their natural course.
Yeah, and kind of pull back on a bunch of the things like
Right.
when you're legislating, solutions to the problems you legislated.
Right.
So it's like maybe we should look at this just a little bit differently. And again, a lot of libertarians kind of get a lot of crap for their viewpoints because they're like, oh, we should have no government, which probably wouldn't work. Most likely wouldn't work.
Right.
But you can get as close as you can and still have some pretty good results.
Right.
But just saying. That's just me. I would love to try it.
There's actually my favorite story on that is, and it's amusing in that it's illustrative of this point, but it's also kind of sad. If you remember last year, we had an issue where that synthetic marijuana was, people were dying from smoking that.
Yeah.
So there was a bill put forward to ban that. And then some of us got together, and our argument was, if we think about it, the reason this people are smoking synthetic marijuana is because of banning regular marijuana.
Yeah.
So maybe logically, from history, you should be able to tell if we ban this, something else, possibly more dangerous, comes up to take its place. But instead of doing that, we just relax.
Yeah.
And that's actually what we're doing this year, where we've had a decriminalization went through, and we had a not legalization exactly, but they've relaxed a lot, and that's passed through the House. It's going to the Senate soon.
I saw that the other day, which I think is great.
Yeah.
Because again, my own positions would be, if they want to do what they want to do, it's fine.
Right.
And you're right. When you start putting prohibitions into things, you create markets for those things.
Right.
With bad consequences, like
Right.
what we're seeing with heroin right now.
Oh, yeah.
And then fentanyl and whatever else gets into the mix. So it's like, so you can make the same argument with marijuana with the heroin, but it's a little harder because it's a little bit of a harder drug, so it's hard to push that.
Right.
But you could probably make the same argument at least. At least I would.
Right. Well, the heroin issue, certainly the fentanyl and everything has made it worse. I think with that, the basic gist of what we need to do is stop throwing money into locking people up for having an addiction. I mean, that's we can discuss the disease portion because some people don't like that word because in a way trying it is a choice. But the way it rewrites your brain chemistry, it becomes less of a choice as time goes on. That's a whole philosophical debate.
Yeah.
But sort of the bottom line of it is you can't arrest your way out of an addiction crisis. That's just not how it works. And it's unfair to ask our police officers to be, drug counselors when they're police officers.
Yeah. And I agree. Kind of on a personal side, my brother was a heroin addict for a long time. And, you can imagine it, like, on the streets. He was in the newspaper a few times for getting caught. And he's doing phenomenally now because of the steps we took to get him into that situation. But it all started after we got him out of the courts. So, like, we finally got him out of the court system. And then we put him into this little program out in Hillsborough. It's phenomenal. And instead of like 2-3 months of being in rehab, you're there for like at least a year, and it's a really good program. I don't get into the religious side of it because I'm not very religious,
Right.
but it does help in that situation, especially for him. But it worked out phenomenally, and I'm like, oh, this is awesome. And it's fun to see something that generally works pretty well, and then I'm like, well, maybe we should look at that a little.
Yeah, let's use the things that are working. Yeah. And for some reason, again, maybe it's just crazy talk, taking someone who's an addict and putting them in a prison, which is a high-stress situation, surrounded by people who sell the thing they're addicted to.
Yeah.
Maybe not the best situation for someone who has an addiction.
Yeah. And people who just generally don't care
Right.
that they're creating this issue because they just want the money.
Right.
And that's where the free market system kind of fails, but it's not really the free market. But yeah, it's why put them in prison for something they if they chose to do it themselves. Generally speaking, they don't hurt other people. Generally, in some instances they could, but more often than not, you would try that separately because you hurt
Right.
someone.
Right. Punish the crime, not the.
Yeah.
I mean, the same way having a pretty daughter makes you more likely to beat up her boyfriend. You don't make it a crime to have a pretty daughter,
Yeah. Okay. I got it. Yeah. So yeah, kind of off business here. Kind of businessy.
Yeah.
But yeah, generally, there's reasons for the government to get involved and then not, and I think people forget that. And I do get in New Hampshire we have a considerably older voting base.
Yeah, it is.
So it can be a little hard to get kind of the new stuff in there because you have kind of a lot of old ideas and a lot of old, I don't know the word, habits, philosophies.
Right. The average age in this state we're actually older than Florida on average, which is surprising. And the average age in the state house, I think last I heard it was around 67, but if you take out myself and like 10 of the youngest people, it shoots up to like 77.
Right.
So yeah, I'm young. Going in there and being younger than the average by 40 years is definitely an eye-opener.
I have that issue sometimes in the business world.
Oh, yeah.
Where I'll walk into a place with a bunch of businesses and be like, I'm way younger than everyone here. And I'm only 30.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, I'm way younger than everybody else in this room by a lot. So I know how you feel there. It can get crazy. Which kind of leads to a point I was going to make all the time. I got into a funny argument on my Facebook page the other day. I guess you could call it an argument. It was a debate. We were talking about some of the problems in New Hampshire and how to fix them, which is always a fun conversation to have politically wise.
Right.
And the age demographic was one of the issues. Then a couple other things came up, like property taxes, income taxes, all this stuff. And I always like to see people who are like, no, we need to, raise the sales tax. I'm like, God, stop. Just stop. You're only going to cripple the state, like, horrifically. Right. But we were talking about the age demographics, and there's not a lot of new people coming into the state.
Right.
Maybe it's weather, maybe it's whatever, but we have a problem on the low end getting young families into the state and then keeping them.
Right.
So the people that grow up here age and then leave.
Right.
So that's kind of one of the areas that I'm like, is that being addressed? Is that something that people are looking into?
It's definitely something everyone is aware of and is looking at. The problem is that sort of disagreement on how you do it.
Yeah.
If you're a Democrat, they are generally of the mindset that sort of, you want more services for young people in this state. You want better infrastructure, which you do, but not for, the price tag they always want to put on it. If you're on the conservative side, it's more about attracting jobs and businesses so you can get out of school and get that job with that decent starting salary in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
When you look at the numbers, what happens is people, graduate high school, maybe go to UNH or Plymouth, graduate there, say thank you very much, go to another state, and 10 or 15 or 20 years down the line, when they're more established and have a family, then they're coming back to New Hampshire with their young kids, and the cycle is sort of repeating itself.
Yeah.
But we don't really have that starting out economic structure where most people can sort of start out in New Hampshire and grow progressively as well as they seem to be able to in other states. And then, of course, that adds to other problems. One of the greatest things to attract or keep young people in a place is other young people in that place. So if we're losing half our people under the age of 25 every year, then the other ones are less and less incentivized to stick around, because, hey, if you're the only young guy there, what's the point?
Not very fun.
Yeah.
Even just on finding a partner and moving forward in your life, it becomes a lot more tricky.
Oh, yeah.
If there's no one here your age, unless you like cougars and, older gents, which, and I think we follow very similarly on a lot of these ideas, which I think is kind of cool. That I saw the same thing in my industry with like the film and stuff like that.
Right.
Like you'll come up through UNH, which has a pretty good film program, and then once you're done, you go to New York, Boston, Georgia, or like LA.
Oh, yeah.
Like pretty much your big choices to find anything in the industry with a lot of like film. And it's like, why are we just throwing over people at Boston and like New York, when we should be fully capable of doing that here. So I think even for my industry, I've been looking at that on my end. And once my business gets big enough, I'm going to start attacking that.
Yeah.
But, until then, we're dealing with it. But I think across the board, that would be, something to look at is, well, what businesses can move in here.
Right.
I was super happy to see that Amazon might have moved in, but that didn't happen.
Yeah.
I'm like, that would have been great.
Well, that's tricky, because if you conclude that to keep young people you need to attract business, which is a pretty fair conclusion, then how do we attract business? And we have a good base structure, overall low tax rate. Some of our taxes are property taxes isn't good.
Yeah.
But our tax rate overall is pretty good. Mm-hmm. There are 2 or 3 big things that are really keeping us away from the big business game. One is the way we have our corporate taxes set up. Those are some of the highest in the country. And especially nowadays, where you can call a guy up down in Delaware and say, hey, set up my LLC for me.
Yeah.
There's no real reason to incorporate in New Hampshire, even if you want to do business in New Hampshire. So we got to get that settled. The next thing we got to tackle is our energy costs. Mm-hmm. Eversource is really, they're a near monopoly in the way they run their business, and they definitely act like it. Is anyone who's received one of those disconnect notices?
Yeah.
No, it's asking for, I think the biggest I heard was around a $3,000 deposit for them to just hold on to for a year from someone who admittedly had trouble paying their electric bill. Yeah. We got to fix that, because they seem to have a view of we can do whatever we want, because if we don't do it, where are they going to get it? And that's how our government acts. Not as much the legislature, but the Public Utilities Commission, certainly. And we actually just had a lot of other companies in New Hampshire the small ones had a big rate decrease. They went down from 15 cents to 9 cents. Yeah. Eversource's response to that was, let's turn off Seabrook. So they just, prices are going down, so let's make less power to boost them back up. Yeah. That's what a monopoly does. We shouldn't be allowing that. And the third thing is our infrastructure, but not in the way a lot of my colleagues are seeing it. Mm-hmm. The basic infrastructure idea they think of are, roads, bridges, highways, and some of that has to be addressed.
Yeah.
As anyone who's ever done the mass into Nashua, the freeway into a deer trail at 5 p.m.
Yeah.
But what we really need is the 21st century infrastructure, the internet access. I mean, even in our cities, internet can be kind of spotty unless you buy your own very expensive Wi-Fi. So that's something, especially north of Concord, that needs to be addressed to bring that part of the state into the global marketplace and get it competitive and get it so that, someone who wants to be an entrepreneur and sell their product online doesn't immediately eliminate half of New Hampshire as a place to live.
And it's good, because actually I'd written down something here as a note to talk about is even the way New Hampshire's laid out, because once you hit, I want to say Laconia, in that area, you have the big, like the National Forest thing going on right there.
Yes.
And then there's like nothing above that.
Right.
So even the way I design my business, when I talk to people, I generally disregard anything north of there as, one, it'd take over 2 hours to get up there, and there's not a whole lot going on.
Right.
So that I could see as a big issue, like you're saying. The infrastructure, roads, we'd have to look at, because you're right, those two roads, like the Ever Turnpike and 93, are awful when it comes to trying to pull people into New Hampshire. So the whole relook at how that's laid out would be fantastic at some point. But then half of your state, or at least, it's not half, because most of the population is further south, but you're losing most of it to just, the forest, and then like that barrier where nothing's there. Right. There's a bunch of French people.
And that's the Canadians are slowly creeping down. No, and that, again, that's the problem, because those areas are hurting economically, and part of it is that you go a little north of Laconia, and you are essentially back in the 70s or 80s technology-wise.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go up to Lincoln, you don't even get cell service, which is, people live without cell phones, which is fine unless you want to, run a business where you need to call customers or have customers call you.
Yeah.
And you want to, sell something on Amazon or buy something on Amazon or use the internet, which we use in our daily life.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that point of technology is where you really see businesses grow very, very quickly.
Right.
Because even way back, until you did business on a large scale, a lot of times your businesses were just like town businesses. And no one's very wealthy, which is okay until the entire town goes under.
Right.
But then you step back and it's like now you have access to things all over the world, and that type of technology has made a lot of people considerably more wealthy and brought even poverty. Like those people are much better off than they had been because of where the money sits and everything. So I think it's a good point. We should look at infrastructure a little bit maybe. And I like your point. Technology is important, and those towns can probably use some help because they're in New Hampshire, and you can't just forget about them because they're 2 hours north of us.
Yeah, you can't. If a big old state like Texas can remember the people in their whole state, we can remember people in North Laconia.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a ton of territory. Like you hit a highway and it's like, see you next week. Next town. So it's definitely needs some work.
Yeah.
But so one thing we talked about was property taxes, because that came up. Some of the big things that came up in my conversation, kind of thrown back to what I was talking about earlier, was property taxes, which I think any way we can get rid of taxes is good. We just need to figure out how to make everything work, which is actually something you talked about a couple of years ago in an interview back in 2014, where sometimes it's not the money, but how we use it.
Right.
Like if we're taking things from places they're not supposed to come from, we're going to have money issues. So that's kind of a thing. But the decrease of property taxes makes property easier to get. and then businesses can actually build.
Right.
And, which was a point this gentleman was making in our conversation, was that there's not a lot of inexpensive property for new families to move into. So it kind of hurts there. And I'm like, well, property taxes.
Right.
So it kind of all falls into this area where I see it as we need to get rid of property taxes or decrease them and figure out how to make them work. But he saw it as we need to raise the minimum wage. I'm like, Jesus, let's spin this a little bit.
Right.
You know, I was talking about bring taxes down, not jacking everything else up.
Well, it's interesting because my first term I was on the Labor Committee, and we heard, I think, in total 6 or 7 minimum wage bills, and none of them were, reasonable. But one thing that came up is they talk about the minimum wage in New Hampshire. Very few people actually work for minimum wage in our state. Mostly it's, the ones you would expect, the younger, high school kids, someone who's picking up a side job for the summer or a couple hours a week during college working retail. But mostly, if you're working full time, the average starting wage is actually close to 9 or 10 in New Hampshire.
Yeah, which is a point I brought up in this little chat I was having online, was that like find a place that offers $7.50 or whatever it is, $7.25. Like find a place that offers that as your minimum wage. I'd love to see that. Yeah. Maybe north of the mountains, maybe. I don't know, but like even if you go to what was it? I went over to Regal once just because I was kind of bored, and like their starting wage was like $9.50 or something like that. So that's like your entry level positions. Yeah. There's a lot of McDonald's and Dairy Queens are starting at like 10 or so, and it's like, okay, so find a place that even offers minimum wage. And his counter argument was, well, if everyone's doing it already, why don't we just move the minimum wage? I'm like, stop it, stop legislating things that don't have to happen.
Right.
The market's catching up and it's growing.
It's working perfectly well without us getting involved.
Yeah.
Let's just let it keep doing that.
Pump the brakes. Because I will always stand from a position of less government.
Right.
There's no need to govern it if it's already doing its thing.
Right.
Just leave it.
Well, and that would just make, for instance, $10 an hour is something a lot of people bring up. And that's, right now, people who make $10 an hour are making a little bit, I think, depending on how you look at it, a little bit more than a third over minimum wage, which is not great, but solid. If you raise minimum wage overnight, they're minimum wage labor. And they're going to be treated as such, and maybe think of themselves as such. So either they're going to demand a raise to 13 to compensate for that, or when you can come in and get your 10 being a minimum wage worker, that's going to sort of lower people's drive to, sort of work for that 10 versus that minimum.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I personally think that everyone, regardless of how much you get paid, should work as hard as you can, because that's how you move up very quickly. Right. But a lot of people don't act that way. I was in the military, and like it didn't matter what you were paid, you were going to work as hard as you can. Right. And you're not going to move up. So I can see where that would fall off of some people. I was going to make a really good point. I forget what it was now. I don't know, minimum wage. But, that was the point. Another big issue I see in the state is where I see people talk about money, essentially. And, okay, you want to talk about minimum wage, fine. Let's also talk about, on the flip side of that, let's talk about credit, how people handle their money and their personal finances. Because when you can make all that stuff work, you'll probably see the minimum wage not be as hard. It's still tough.
Right.
But, because it's not supposed to be lived on. Like, it's not.
Yeah, it's a starting wage.
Yeah, it's when you're a child, you're supposed to move into that type of position. But when you're also rolling out like a $700-800 phone, maybe we should be really looking at where your money's going.
Right. And the other thing, the point I've always made, which the state isn't too bad on, although, again, property taxes and the sort of room and meals tax, which is a de facto sales tax on tourism, which is only one of New Hampshire's biggest industries, so what do we care if they hurt that? But federally, the income tax, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, all these taxes they take out of every paycheck, you sort of look at, well, no, $7.25 isn't great to live on, but you know what's worse? The $4 or $5 you're left with after taxes.
Yeah.
So maybe that's an issue to look at.
There's a difference. Yeah. And that's a great point. And one I completely forgot to even mention later on is that, you get $7.50 or $7.25, but then they take most of it because you're paying all this other shit that shouldn't be in there. It's ridiculous, Yeah. So I can see how living on minimum wage wouldn't work once you throw in all the taxes, because it barely works without the taxes.
Right.
So I get that.
Yeah.
It's a much better argument when you put it that way. But another thing I was going to talk about business side. I talked about this a lot in the last couple of podcasts I've had, which you probably haven't listened to, but we talked about New Hampshire business is kind of old school. So the way they do things is kind of outdated most of the time. And I laugh because when it comes to like video production, like video marketing, stuff like that, way behind the times.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I laugh at people for doing this. It's like, we don't need that. We'll just do word of mouth. I'm like, stop it. Word of mouth is great if people know who you are.
Right.
If no one knows you, no one's talking about you. And that one dude you worked with isn't going to spread you around to enough people to make a difference.
Right.
And I think that also probably hurts the minimum wage argument a little bit, because businesses aren't moving as fast as they should to advance as fast as they should, just kind of from my point.
Right. And that actually the government's the same way. I know, shocker. But before I started at my current position where I work to actually earn a living and fund my legislative habit, I owned a computer repair and IT consulting business over in Portsmouth, and came time to renew the business license, so thinking nothing of it, I just called them up. I'm like, okay, so I'm not finding this form on the website, and they said, no, you got to come into Concord and take care of that. I'm like, wait, for me it's no big deal. I'm in Concord every other week, so it's fine. But for any other businessman, it's like, wait, so I need to take an hour out of my day, come to Concord, stand in line for 45 minutes, get the form from you, fill out the physical form, go back to you, have you tell me the form is wrong, go back, fill out the form right, go back to you, you stamp the form, I get in my car, drive an hour back. So I've lost half a day of work because you can't put the damn form on a website.
Yeah, which they finally done. I believe so, because you can incorporate online now.
You can incorporate. I think renewal might be. They might have changed it recently.
Maybe.
It's been.
I don't know. I'll have to double check because I'm going through the process now because I just hit like a year doing this. But I'll let you know.
Yeah, keep me posted.
Yeah, because technology is huge, and as we've talked about, it helps push everyone to that next level. Just the amount of information we have accessible to us, which okay, so get a little off tangent now. It baffles me when people just have crazy ideas and they. Okay, I'm gonna get into college. Sorry, I'm here.
That's okay.
Education. This is where it's going. I'm going to education. It says we have some good schools in the state, but people tend to think that to become smart you have to go to college.
Right.
Drives me freaking crazy. So, because I hate that. I don't know why I'm even getting into this conversation. It's not business related, but so I guess we can start there. How are the colleges in the state?
Well, they are. That's kind of a loaded question, but our colleges are in the university system of New Hampshire are as quality as any other state in the union. But the trick of it is the fight is always certain people just want to dump money into the colleges. And money for education is a good thing. Generally, I'm in favor of a well-funded education. But again, the idea is how are we spending that money? And one thing you consistently see is the community college system perform such great work with the relatively shoestring budget we give them, but they always seem to get sort of kicked to the curb in favor of the university system, which is UNH, Keene, Plymouth, and there's always an argument for them because unlike a lot of groups, come budget time, the university system doesn't give us an itemized proposal. They'll come up to us and say, okay, here, we want a 12% increase in funding. And we go, well, what do you want it for? And they go, oh, things and stuff. So there was actually a bill I co-sponsored that unfortunately if I remember right, didn't make it, that would require them to submit an itemized list, which I think, is practical because I'm not against, properly funding this system. But at the same time, I don't think, we need to give interpretive dance or women's studies or any of these things that aren't going to get our people into the workforce with good, stable jobs. I think we need to be reasonable about how we're funding it. And I think we need to, and this is more of a cultural thing than a legislative thing, is change our culture where you aren't sort of default told as a high school kid that you have to go to college or it's not going to work out. You automatically have to. It was the right path for me. There are plenty of people who, are doing much better than I am, making more money than I am, who went into trades or went into the military and took that, some time and either made a career of it or got out and decided what they wanted to do. There are a lot of avenues to success, a lot of avenues to a good life after school. And I think it's a little unfair that we're pushing college with its massive debts onto the young people in this state, especially when that massive debt sort of requires that starting salary that needs to be that much higher, which New Hampshire can't provide, so it then drives them out of the state.
Yeah, I agree. So, yeah, I kind of switched subjects because I was getting, I can get going. We talk politics, I can get going. But so I'm going to rein in a little bit when I give you a chance to speak. So, but colleges don't have a monopoly in education. They like to think they do, and I tell you they do. You probably can't see, but I'll change my camera. But behind you, I have like a bookshelf it's half full of my books right now. I have hundreds more at my house. Those are just the ones I brought for here. So I read upwards of about a book a week or more.
Nice.
And so I'm constantly learning. I always tell people this during interviews, but I had someone back at school, I'm not going to say who, straight up called me average one day, pretty much called me dumb. And from that point forward, I was like, yeah, just like tweaked my brain. I'm constantly learning things, which is really weird. I don't like being called stupid. Right. So I learned different things, but it's not school related. It's not like, well, I'm going to sit in a classroom and learn how to write a freaking paper.
You don't need a piece of paper to be intelligent or be capable.
Yeah. Go read a book on accounting. If you can't do that, read a book on how to start a business, run a business, learn how to better yourself. There's 1,000 different things you can do to become smarter and move into a field that isn't like being a doctor or a lawyer or somewhere that you would probably more need a degree because it's more specialized. And because a lot of things are just useless. Like, why are we getting degrees in some of these things when, there's no need? Like, if you're going to run a business that isn't like, again, being a doctor or a lawyer, a chiropractor or something, like, go do something. Go do it. Go learn, in the field. You'll learn way more. Because I go to a school right now, everyone knows where, but I'm not going to bother saying it. Just call them out. But, I'm a marketing major, and I floor my professors every time I'm in a damn class. Like, I have some of my professors as clients. I don't talk about that much, but, these are marketing people who are teaching you how to market, who don't know how to run their businesses, so they come to me. and I'm
Right.
one of their students. So I kind of chuckle. I'm like, why are we paying for all of this when?
I hope they give you an A by default. Like, yeah,
No,
you're
I make it a habit. Like, I will not do business with you while I'm a student, like, in your class.
Yeah.
But afterwards we can talk, and it happens. Like, it happens. And because I sell very specialized products that are very good at what they do, and people just get away from that type of stuff because they're like, oh, look at marketing and SWOT analysis is all this stupid, like, 50-year-old things.
right.
But they're like, whatever. But that's one of the big, I think I see that as a problem across the board because we're driving kids into school systems that aren't necessary. And I spoke with, was it a business consultant? I think it was a big business consultant last week. And same thing. She even mentioned we have a workforce problem now where you're starting to get a lot of old people getting ready to leave, and there's no young people to move up.
Right.
So we have a huge problem in the trades because we're going to have a serious lack of, like, carpenters and plumbers, and because there's no one there because we've 20 years of pushing them into college, and then no one wants to do a trade job. So it's kind of things I think of when I'm like, how do I fix the state?
Right. And it's, like I said, unfortunately, that's something that isn't really legislative. It's cultural. Like the bottom line on the opioid epidemic is another thing. A lot of people want to look at why, which is an important question, but the why of it, and they try to find a legislative answer. There's no legislative answer to either of those. It's a cultural answer, and the culture needs to stop treating people who go into the trades like they're lesser than people who go to college. The same way the culture needs to answer the question of what is it that's wrong in our culture that are driving so many people to engage in such self-destructive behavior with the opioid epidemic.
Yeah. Which is, that's a good point because it's a good question of, a lot of these people know what's going around on the street. So why are we jamming ourselves with something that'll probably kill you?
Right.
Or most likely will kill you if I've seen the numbers correctly. Like, it's insane. Like, I'm not going to do that. Like, it's almost like playing Russian roulette. You have similar odds. And it's like, why are we doing that when you know? But, again, I'm not in that situation. I never started, but God, I can only imagine.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That's a lot of what I had. I think that's pretty good. We're running almost an hour.
Oh, good.
Pretty good, yeah. So how do people get a hold of you if they have any questions, or how do they get a hold of their representatives? We can go down that road.
Okay. The New Hampshire General Court website has a Find My Representative feature, and it'll actually take you to your rep's page and give you their address, phone number, and email address. I can say for any of my Goffstown constituents or anyone who wants to get in touch with me, you can either email me at Nick Zaricki, Zaricki, always got to spell it, at gmail.com, or my personal cell phone is 802-727-0413. I can't promise I'll pick up while I'm working during the day, but if you leave a message, I'll do my best to get back to you.
Pretty good. Is Goffstown still one of the largest towns in the state?
It's one of the largest towns. It's actually larger than one or two of the cities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was funny. I was looking at it the other day, and I'm like, out of like all 250, it's like number 10.
Yeah.
I was like, jeez, that's
Yeah.
pretty good. It's such a small place too.
Yeah, it's you don't realize how small some of these towns are when you're growing up in Goffstown. Then you realize it gets way smaller.
Oh yeah, it's impressive. I didn't realize how big Goffstown was until I saw that, and I was like, whew.
Yeah.
Oh jeez, because I was prepping for this interview. Cool. That's pretty much. Oh, I did have one last question. This is a fun one.
Sure.
Come national election time, there's always a big, like, hoopla about New Hampshire. Why is that?
Well, the first thing is we have the first in the nation primary, obviously, and the even the Iowa caucus, the whole joke is Iowa picks corn, New Hampshire picks presidents. So in terms of the competitive primaries, New Hampshire is really the state that's going to sort of weed it down to the 2 or 3 contenders for the party nomination. In the general election, first of all, New Hampshire is a swing state overall. It's gone Democrat in the past few presidential elections, but we swing back and forth enough with the people we send to Washington and to Concord. It's always close enough to be interesting. And because it's such a small state that the candidates spend so much time in early on, New Hampshire voters, kind of more than any other state, have a very personal, very in-depth view of the candidate as a person as well as their policy positions.
Yeah.
I mean, I may have thrown them out. I still have Christmas cards from 2016 from everyone who ran. If you're even remotely interested, you can normally meet everyone running for president that winter. It's not hard to do in New Hampshire. And that's just, without disparaging anyone in any other state, I think the voters in New Hampshire take sort of that honor and burden of being the first in the nation and the people who get to know these candidates up close and ask the in-depth questions. I think we've done it long enough. We take it very seriously and we know how to do it. So New Hampshire's opinion and what happens in New Hampshire and how New Hampshire views the candidates is fairly well respected in the country.
All right, cool. I've always been curious about that because once I started getting into politics, I'm like, why does everyone care so much about this one state?
Right.
And that's why. So, cool. I've always been curious. I just figured I'd ask someone who actually might know instead of just imagining it. Cool. So thank you so much for being on the show with me today, Nick.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
And until next time, everyone, be awesome.